Hello, everybody. My name is Vijay Sambamurthi, and welcome to yet another episode of the Uncluttered View with Vijay Sambamurthi. That's our podcast show where we invite guests who are leaders in their respective fields and invite them to talk about some of the interesting issues in the areas they are in. The reason it's called the Uncluttered View, of course, is that we encourage or exhort our guests to speak freely, without too many hedges, without too many ifs and buts. And we have always had a great time providing good content that's useful for all of you, especially when we have such a stellar cast of guests that we have. Today's guest is no different, and before I get into introducing him, I will also tell you one more thing that's very special and unique about this episode of Uncluttered View, and that is that for the first time, it is being shot in the Silicon Valley. So I'm right now in the US on a business trip, and I had, the pleasure of just reaching out to today's guest, who's a good friend and a industry leader here in the Valley, and he very graciously and kindly agreed to do this despite the short notice. So here we go with the first non-Indian, non-Singapore episode of the Uncluttered View. And it's very exciting for me personally because the Silicon Valley, as you all know, is one of the most buzzy and energy-filled places on the planet, both from a technological perspective and from a business perspective. And these days, AI has only made that on steroids. So therefore, it's only appropriate that the gentleman that I'm going to be talking to today is somebody who is in the thick of all the AI action in the Valley and around the world. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Vijay Krishnan, who is the co-founder and CTO of Turing. Now, I'll obviously let Vijay do an intro about him when I ask him the questions, but here's a brief intro about Vijay. He's my namesake. He has a very cool name, and that's something which I think. But apart from that, the even cooler thing is that this is his second startup, and he already has, in a few years of starting up, turned this into a unicorn. So they are already worth more than a couple of $1 billion, and they've raised funding from top-notch marquee investors, and they are solving for using AI to assist with talent management and talent-related issues. So I'll let Vijay talk about his startup in greater detail, but it gives me great pleasure to welcome Vijay Krishnan to the show again. So thank you, Vijay, for agreeing to so graciously make time for us on such short notice. As I mentioned to you, the reason I decided to invite Vijay is because he was in Singapore. I think was it a couple of months ago, 2-3 months ago, as a guest of TIE Singapore, where I'm a long-standing charter member. So he actually gave us a very good talk. So I thought that the viewers of the Uncluttered View could also benefit from his insights and his experiences, and that's why here we are. So Vijay, let's start by talking about your early days. I always like to ask my guests about their early days because everybody knows what they're doing now. So you grew up in Chennai, or Madras as it was called then, I suppose. And so did I. Mm-hmm. I grew up, but it was called Madras certainly when I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s. So you were slightly probably later. You grew up maybe in the latter half of the 80s and maybe in the 90s. So as somebody who grew up in Chennai, so how did you get into engineering? I mean, you went to IIT Bombay. Mm-hmm. Now, was that a family pressure thing? Because I know coming from a Madras-based family full of engineers, how the pressure can be. Mm-hmm. So tell us what the situations were. Was it that you were very passionate to become an engineer? Was it that everybody in the family wanted you to be an IIT guy? Tell us that story.
Yeah, it was a bit of both. I mean, I grew up in a number of cities, including Chennai. I also spent many years in Bangalore as a child and a couple of years in Hyderabad also. As for engineering itself, I would say it was both. You're right. If I were made of a completely different disposition in terms of interests, etc., it might have been quite a misfit. Yeah, in my case, yes, there were definitely multiple IITians in my family and everything. And yes, there was definitely that expectation. Fortunately, that was very, very well aligned with my interests, my nature, and things like that also.
Okay. But was it very, therefore, putting a lot of pressure? You mentioned that there are a lot of IITians in the family.
Right.
That must have also put a lot of pressure that you have to be there. Was it there, or did you find yourself doing it because you genuinely loved it?
I mean, yeah, I loved it also. So it did not really feel like pressure. I guess it probably feels like pressure when it gets misaligned.
Understood.
Yeah.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's absolutely fair. So now, so when you were growing up, so where did you go to school? Which school did you go to in Chennai?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it was just a couple of my years at high school that was in
Only
Chennai.
the high school.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. In Chennai, I went to Don Bosco Egmore.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's a nice school.
Yeah.
So that's great. So then you were in IIT Bombay, and so right after that, you went to Stanford.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's amazing. Like most people would, give an arm or a leg just to get into an IIT. Now you got into an IIT and then you went to Stanford. So tell me about what drove you to straight away go and study further, because many people grapple with that. Should they get some experience after IIT especially? So was that again something that you had predetermined, or did it just happen? How was that?
So I think during my undergraduate days, I happened to pick a research area that related to AI and machine learning. This was many, many years ago. This was back in 2003, long before even the deep learning revolution, leave alone the new LLM revolution. So having worked in that particular area, published papers in that specific area and so on, my goal at that point was to go to a good university, get my PhD, and then figure out what I wanted to do next.
Okay.
So at that point, at least I was quite clear. I wanted to go to grad school, build on this, do more work in AI, publish more and all that.
That is a lot of clarity, because most people, of course, say, I want to become an engineer. They say, I want to become a computer scientist. But how did you specifically hone into data sciences, which are, as you said, not even really understood? Forget about understood, not even much heard of, let alone be understood. So how did you get into the fact that you wanted to dive deep into data sciences, number one? Number two, did you really have a sense of how big AI and data sciences would become? Or was it something of more of following your passion and heart, and it kind of clicked eventually that it became big? So which of the two was it?
Yeah, it was much more following my passion. I mean, I did have some eye toward practical utility. For example, I did not attempt to go purely into theoretical computer science and graph theory and things of that sort, where more or less your only option, if you wish to continue in that area, is to become a professor at some university. But so I didn't really go veer toward that kind of extreme. I did know that there were practical applications, but within the arena of where practical applications existed, this is what excited me the most by far.
Okay.
That was definitely the largest driver. Additionally, it also helped that I happened to work with some really world-renowned research advisors. Like at IIT Bombay, my research advisor was Shauman Chakrabarti, and this who is quite a world famous name in this specific area, and that gave me a very, very nice early start also. I think without that kind of exposure, I might not have possibly started in this area that early.
And what about in Stanford? So you walk us through some of the highlights of what you did at Stanford and learned at Stanford, which kind of stood out and helped you in the future when you started up even your first one and the second one.
When I joined Stanford, my goals were a lot more about getting a PhD, remaining in the research area for longer and so on. So I did do some work with a couple of professors in computer science, Chris Manning and Andrew Ng, one professor in medical informatics, Atul Butte, who was quite a pioneer in the use of data for precision medicine, who unfortunately passed away a couple months ago. I had done some work with all of them, written papers and so on. But sometime after my first year, I think the startup bug started to bite me more and more. Like earlier, before coming to Stanford.
I guess it happens at Stanford, right? The startup bug bites a lot of people when they're at Stanford.
Right.
That's what a quality university does.
Yeah. Since the point is, now of course the situation is rather different. At the IITs, there's so many unicorns founded by my juniors in India and so on. That was not quite the case back then. So at that point, at least, okay, doing a startup seemed like a theoretically an interesting idea, but it seemed like there were too many holes. Even I didn't know how to go about it, any of that stuff. At Stanford, increasingly, right? Like given our social groups, a lot of things around the ecosystem, it seemed a lot within reach. I remember we took this class on entrepreneurship during grad school, which while obviously it couldn't have possibly taught us everything about becoming a good founder, but it absolutely taught us how not to make rookie mistakes, which I do see many founders even struggle with for many years. It taught us how to stop not make rookie mistakes in 2 or 3 months, which was itself helpful. And of course, after that we were kind of on our own.
What sort of rookie mistakes did it teach you to avoid?
Lot of things. Like, for example, firstly, it taught us to put a lot of emphasis on the market. Make sure you're solving a real problem. Put the customer first. Not be so obsessed with just your technology. Think in terms of what is a pathway to revenue. A lot of things like this. That and even how does venture capital work? All that.
They taught you all that.
Yeah.
And obviously, because you have many entrepreneurs also speaking about it, as opposed to just professors, right? So that gives the practical side of entrepreneurship as well.
Yeah. And at Stanford, a lot of professors have played on the other side of the fence also. A number of computer science professors have taken a number of companies IPO. Sure. There's all sorts of things. Yes. One of the professors, the late Professor Hector Garcia, who advised us in our prior startup, he was also the advisor to Larry Page and Sergey Brin at Google. So there was all of this, which was... which would have been this sort of exposure would have just been difficult to get any place else. One of the founders of YouTube, Javed Karim, was our classmate. The founders of Instagram were our juniors, and so on. Yeah.
No, absolutely. It's I can imagine how motivating it must be when you are surrounded by such company.
Right.
And it's a nice kind of pressure that it motivates you to do great stuff.
Right.
So 2007 was when you, completed your Stanford innings there. So when did your first startup Rover come about, and how did you meet your co-founder? Were you guys together at Stanford? Or?
Yeah. My co-founder and I were good friends back from Stanford at grad school. Both of us specialized in AI back then at Stanford. It was not even the most popular specialization at that point.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Systems and databases were a lot more popular at that point. Though, of course, even like 5-10 years later, that drastically changed. But yes, the two of us collaborated a good deal on various things, including building a search engine for a particular class, and did other kinds of projects together. So later, as we were closer to graduation, as we were brainstorming various things, the startup idea for our first startup started kind of crystallizing in our minds, and put us on a pathway to eventually founding that together.
Okay, great. And so what were you trying to solve with Rover? And what is the AI angle there as well?
Yeah. So, we ran that company for a certain number of years. We started off with personalized search. We did that for some number of years. Ultimately, we felt that it was hard to run that as an independent company. I mean, we had some acquisition offers at that point that we chose not to take, and we figured, our choices are either get acquired or we'll have to change direction. This is not a sustainable one.
So ahead of time, basically.
Yeah. So we went on to then move to personalized content recommendations, which is what we did for most of the remainder of the company's existence until its acquisition.
Okay. And when was it acquired?
It was acquired in late 2016, early 2017.
Okay.
Then.
And then after that, say, soon after you started Turing, or was it ever?
Yeah. I mean, we spent a little bit of time with the company that acquired us. After that, we took a bit of a break. We sort of relaxed, rested, recharged, all that. Became EIR set foundation capital, which was quite a sort of low responsibility kind of thing. I think foundation capital's point was come hang around our offices, figure out what you want to do next.
Okay.
We'll try to be as helpful as we can, and that was more or less it. It gave us an opportunity to figure out, brainstorm ideas and everything. In fact,
pretty good.
That was also I mean, I can see the rationale. Like as an investor, you want to make some efforts also toward cultivating good deal flow. So, but yes, it was nice win-win thing for sure. We absolutely have loved working with them. But so those few months were quite helpful. It helped us decompress. It helped us sort of also think in terms of relatively more open-endedly about all sorts of wild ideas, which becomes a little bit difficult when you're actually running a company. I mean, when you're running a company, it's difficult to every day sit back and think from first principles regarding what you could do completely differently. You are very much hemmed in by what you're doing. But it is exactly on those kind of times that you have the freedom to be maximally creative. And it is helpful to take full advantage of that, because the one way I think about this is, if you once you jump into a specific sort of startup direction, you're more or less climbing that specific hill. Yes, you can pivot and all that, but pivots are expensive. They come at the loss of efficiency. You might have burned through a lot of capital. There is a lot of stuff. It is definitely very, 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 very desirable if you can carefully survey the whole landscape of hills that you could be climbing. Think of what is the tallest hill that you're uniquely qualified to climb, basically.
So why did you pick the hill that you're on right now? Why did you pick, talent management related use case? And why did you think you are uniquely positioned to solve that? Walk us through that.
I think ideally a company that you're doing should satisfy a number of properties. There should be a large market opportunity to create a lot of impact. There should exist something about that specific market which allows you to offer something that is a lot better than the status quo, not just slightly better, but a lot better. People often in common parlance say 10x better.
Sure.
And ideally, there should be a strong founder market fit, that your understanding of the market, the opportunity, etc. should be ideally relatively unique, which allows you to see some of the large opportunities here that a lot of equally smart people have probably not seen.
Okay.
Like Peter Thiel in his book 0 to 1 calls this secrets.
Of course.
Basically. So, in our case, we did evaluate a couple of different ideas at that point. I think two ideas we evaluated seriously were the idea that would become Turing, and another idea that was to do with AI for sales coaching. Okay. So that would be like a competitor to
sales coaching.
Yeah.
I see.
B2B sales coaching. Yeah. Okay. Competitor to this Gong, Chorus and things like that.
Sure.
We ultimately opted to go down the Turing route just because of the founder market fit criteria. I mean, Gong, of course, has been a very successful company.
Right.
I think they've crossed 200 million ARR, maybe even more. I've not kept very close track. It is a perfectly good space, all right. But yeah, at least at that point, I don't think our founder market fit was that strong. When it came to the specific Turing idea, I think our understanding of the nature of talent in a number of countries around the world, etc., I think was quite differentiated. Mm-hmm. Like in our prior startup, we had worked with a lot of really talented software engineers from a number of countries in Eastern Europe. At that point, Russia, Ukraine, Poland, Serbia, China, the Middle East, all sorts of places. And we had also figured out how to make these remote teams work well.
Right.
And so our contrarian thesis, which we believed was right, and I think with the passage of time we were proven right also, was that a significant number of software teams that were all US teams had to operate this way, because the companies that took this route would be hugely advantaged.
Okay.
We felt like a lot of the traditional reasons why people went for an all local US team were all, I mean, the objections people brought up were quite solvable, and the benefits to solving those were huge.
Okay.
All the way from, how do you source that talent? How do you vet that talent? How do you deal with the time zone issues? How do you run that remote team to be as good as a local team, and so on? We felt a lot of that was quite solvable, and I think a lot of our insights here were quite really. I mean, we did not think any of those insights were rocket science, but I think it did turn out those insights were not widely understood, and that was a big part of why we picked that.
You figured that you were underselling yourself in terms of how valuable it was, or not underselling, undervaluing yourself internally till you saw the market actually plays a much higher value on it.
And saw that the whole thing was quite poorly understood, even though to us it seemed quite obvious. I think very few people would have agreed with us back in 2018, at least 2 years before COVID and everything.
And there was no Gen AI back then.
There was no Gen AI too.
So let me share this very personal thing that we went through at Lexygen. So as you know, we are a law firm. And lawyers and law firms have historically been accused of being the most resistant to any change. We don't want anything to change. We like things to be the way they are. Okay. So in this background, we were slightly different because back in 2018, much before all this, we had actually organized a conference where we invited multiple law firms from around the world. And we also invited some of the legal tech companies, as they were called. None of them were calling themselves AI companies. So there was LexisNexis, which was a giant, and there were a couple of Indian startups, which had raised some preliminary funding. And we had, at that point of time, decided that we would start looking at some of these solutions. But these guys, it's the same thing. What happened with your first startup? If an idea is slightly ahead of its time, it's tough to sell it, right? And the same thing happened with us. We went into this mode of trying out something. We got somebody to work with us to develop something for our own use. And it didn't really come out the way we wanted it to. So we ended up spending a lot of time, and we thought, oh, what a waste of time this has been. And then out of the blue, a couple of years ago when Gen AI happened, out of the blue, right? At least for us, it is out of the blue because we are not taking the tech industry. Maybe for somebody like you, it was not so out of the blue, but for us, it was. So then we have again gotten into the whole thing. So I can definitely empathize with what you're saying. In 2018, for many people to believe you and fund you and back you, when the level of compute was so low and inadequate, the quality of technology was not great. So I'm not surprised. But hats off to you guys for lasting through. Walk us through that journey, how you survived that, and who are your early backers who funded you, and did you see some threats during COVID? Did you see some opportunities? How did that play out?
Our early investors were Foundation Capital. There were a whole bunch of popular angels like Adam D'Angelo of Quora, who now on the board of OpenAI as well. Gokul Rajaram, a whole bunch of others. Some of our later larger rounds were done mostly led by Westbridge Capital, and there's a whole bunch of other investors also on our cap table. So in the early days, we mostly focused on helping companies build remote teams and engage in full scale tech consulting and implementation services, but being able to do so with a much higher quality global team, just because of the larger talent pool we were pulling in from. I would say at Turing, we saw a lot of this openness toward remote happening in 2019 itself.
Okay.
With talent shortages and everything, the markets companies became more and more open to it. COVID, of course, accelerated it a great deal, particularly with large enterprises.
Of course.
With a lot of mid-market companies, for example, where there was no complex policy or anything of that sort, they responded to needs a lot quicker.
Okay.
With a lot of large enterprises, I still recall, like in 2019, many of the engineering leaders would book calls with us. They would like everything about what we have to say, but then they would get blocked by procurement.
Of course.
And a whole bunch of those folks, I think a few months into COVID, came back saying, hey, you know what, guess what we talked last year, and
everything's changed.
Everything has changed. Our management is open to this. Let me make the necessary intros and let's get going. So COVID was definitely quite an accelerant, because like before that, the main sort of sales objection we would hear is people would love everything we have to say. We are drawing from this large talent pool. We are testing people thoroughly. You get an all-star team comprising the top few percent of the world's talent. All the people will overlap with your time zone substantially. All that stuff. People loved all of that, but they were like, oh, all that is great, but I want them sitting next to me in my office. I want to watch them work. That is what made it challenging. But during COVID and remote work, people figured, hey, anyway, I'm not going to get all of that. Then there is no sales objection remaining.
Yeah, I think that's true. That's 100% true, because a lot of industries, when I talk to people who are in top management or founders, repeat, including ours, right? Including ours. Specifically about Lexygen, we had already been using technology. We were using, video conferencing and, Zoom. We're probably one of the early users of Zoom much before the pandemic. But the way it got adopted, earlier, if you suggest a video conference to a client would say, why can't you just get on the plane and come to me? Or even Bangalore. So if you're in Bangalore, client will say, why should I do a video call with you? Just, come to my office. But the point is that you'd waste 3 hours going and coming back to the meeting in Bangalore traffic. And in Bombay, that's even worse. And you have to fly. So it never, there was always that resistance. So I think COVID helped shed those inhibitions in people in terms of the reluctance they had or friction they had to using technology and doing things virtually. But coming back to, Turing, what was that sudden thing that accelerated you to unicorn status? If you were to pick one thing that, was it the sudden accelerant of COVID?
Yeah. So I would say we have had two significant kind of tailwinds. So the first one was definitely this COVID and companies' openness to remote work, etc., which was quite the first sort of wave of accelerant that sort of got us to this that made us a unicorn that helped us hit this 100 million ARR.
Okay.
But a big chunk of the second wave of growth has certainly come on the back of this new AI opportunity that we embraced and rode to the fullest, which I can talk more about.
So, in fact, since you brought it up, we might as well segue right into that. So, what was I understand the opportunity was with OpenAI. And, do you want to talk about what you did with them and how you grabbed that?
Right.
This whole Gen AI opportunity that came up.
Right.
Is that what you're talking about?
Correct. That's right. Yeah. So today we help all the major frontier AI companies, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, a whole bunch of others improve their foundation models across a range of areas, including coding, reasoning, multimodality, function calling, agentic workflows, frontier STEM knowledge, multilinguality, all sorts of things. By way of expert human data for post-training. So we got started in this specific area, I think, pretty much around the time we became a unicorn. That is when I think we had our first conversations with OpenAI.
But was this pre-Chat GPT or
pre-Chat? But this was key to the Chat GPT launch itself. Yeah. We had a very key role to play even in the first thing there. So I think OpenAI was the first company to realize the value of this expert human feedback for post-training. So earlier, as you might have probably heard, the most of these models are pre-trained almost on the entire internet, a few trillion tokens. So think of that as the equivalent of maybe, if you assume some 500 words or 500 tokens per page, you assume that is the equivalent of some 10 billion unique pieces of content, code, all kinds of things. So a lot of people tended to think in terms of raw volume. They didn't quite realize the impact that targeted human feedback of a much smaller scale could have in terms of shaping model behavior and making them a lot better in some of the areas that we care about. I think OpenAI was the first one that realized that this was quite possible. So we put together teams of software developers, data scientists, ML engineers, various other kinds of experts to help evaluate model weaknesses in different technical areas of this sort, identify model weaknesses, figure out how we might create the right supervised fine-tuning data sets, how we might create the right RLHF tasks, execute on this, and ultimately provide high-value model feedback in areas where the models are weak and help the models get better. So this is what we have done for a relatively large number of our clients. The new I would say opportunity that's opened up here is the fact that there was never that these projects need one to very rapidly put together a team of a large number of experts in some core areas that people wish to improve models in, run that team of experts in a certain way and become an effective research partner to researchers at these labs. And that is the opportunity that we've embraced. And of course, having worked with one or two companies in the space, we built a lot of specialized capabilities as well, and have specialized tooling, process, and other capabilities too.
So let me ask you a very sort of a comparative question, right? You've done two startups, both with the same co-founder, so that's a constant, right? But what would you say were the key changes from an AI ecosystem perspective in terms of when you started up Rover versus when you started up Turing? Were there any? Obviously, this OpenAI opportunity came up, but that is, like you said, much later after you already became a unicorn, right? So clearly, you couldn't have banked on that, or you couldn't have, thought of starting up with this kind of an approach with that in mind. So, what did you think was, something that motivated both of you to again go into the same AI space when your first, according to you, was already ahead of its time, so it had to be sold prematurely, maybe. So, what was the, were there any behavioral shifts? Were there any technological shifts that you saw coming in the AI space, which you decided to?
Yeah, so the deep learning era got kickstarted in this 2012, 2013, and a lot of nice advances certainly happened on account of that. Like a lot of problems when it came to images, unstructured data, natural language processing, and so on, were simply unsolvable in the past, and a lot of them came within reach. Yeah, but I would not overly fixate on that portion alone. So there was definitely some nice tailwinds there if one were to pick the right problem. But that said, I would not just fixate on that. I would say we paid a lot more attention to the market, the opportunity, why we think we can do 10x better than the status quo and all of that. Like when we got started as first time founders many years ago, yes, we might have known some of the stuff in theory, but we were not, we had not been, let's just say, pushed around so as much in the real world to, and I don't think our judgment and our approach was obviously a lot more refined second time around. So we yes, while we were certainly interested in what AI can enable, we were first and foremost quite interested in the market, the opportunity. Why do we think we can do something 10x better? All the other things I mentioned to you.
Of course.
Like, in fact, I remember Andreessen saying this probably in 2011 or something from Andreessen Horowitz, one of the most famous firms. When it comes to team, technology, and market as factors of driving startup success, he puts market factors first above all else. Since in an A+ market, even a B grade team can have a very good outcome. And of course, if you can get an A+ across the board, you're onto something spectacular. But over the years, I think this need for really nailing the market and solving the right problem became a lot more kind of obvious and ingrained in us. And I think we made a lot of the right key decisions early in terms of the problem space to tackle that would, with the largest opportunity that we also understood well.
Okay, understood. So I'm going to ask slightly, something that is a very important question to be asked in my view. So obviously, as you know, I don't need to repeat the fact that I have been passionate about AI despite being a non-techie, because in use case of even something as boring as legal, where we work. So as a transactional lawyer, I've been doing this, sort of asking the questions around this for a long time now. So I hardly need to establish that I'm interested and I'm for the AI movement. And we've seen in the last 2 years how dramatically things have changed. But equally, is it fair to say that some of the concerns that used to exist, for example, privacy concerns, accuracy concerns, in today's world, deepfakes are a big concern. And it's like unbelievable how incredibly good looking or accurate looking they are, but they're long. So that's one. Secondly, there's a lot of scams, especially, people historically think that Singapore is like an extremely safe market and a safe city, which it is. It is in the physical sense. But last 2 years, I'm seeing a dramatic change in all sorts of scams which are perpetrated, which are primarily technology-driven scams, where they are, using somebody's voice, using AI. They have used somebody's voice to say, this person is being held in some jail, those kind of stories. Earlier, these used to happen secondary, but now it sounds primary because the person is hearing it in their son's voice or daughter's voice. That's scary. That's the second part. And the third part, which is also scary, is are we as a human race becoming too dependent on technology because of AI? We have always been progressively, that's what progress has always been about. Earlier, we used to go and we used to use bullocks to, till the land, and now we have tractors, and that's good. But with AI, the problem is that are we all becoming at risk? Are we all at risk of becoming a little lazy as a race? And how can we kind of keep ourselves relevant in the age of AI? These are some of the questions that I wanted to raise. And the reason is, and it's not just me, voices who are a lot more authoritative than me have asked this question. I'm sure you're aware of this gentleman who's considered one of the godfathers of AI, Jeffrey Quinton. He's also raised these issues, saying that, there needs to be some sort of a gatekeeping which needs to happen. So, and that's where I'm going to put on my lawyer hat and say that at some level, to protect these things, to protect, the misuse of AI or prevent these kind of societal things, is some sort of a rational regulation from governments needed. Of course, it can't be over regulated either. It can't be where they're not letting the industry grow. But at the same time, to prevent this kind of misuse, just like you have data privacy laws, just like earlier you had Information Technology Act in India, similar laws around the world. So I'd like to get your perspective on this. And how do you think that the risk can be addressed technologically, and how can it be addressed regulatorily?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. People have certainly been doing work technologically on AI safety and trying to make it difficult for it to sort of engage in some of these bad behaviors and so on. But it remains to be seen how robust they will be. I think some of these maybe put one line of defense, but at the moment, at least, a lot of those very much look like one line of defense, not a lot more, particularly with such a proliferation of open source models. I think a lot of open source models which even have one line of defense like this that line of defense can easily be stripped away with some fine tuning and to engage in more bad behavior. Regulation is an interesting question. I think the question becomes how do you do it in a way which actually serves your end goal and does not just hinder AI progress. I think, unfortunately, almost everything people are talking about would be the kind which would just create more monopolies and so on, and perhaps make it harder for ground up innovation to come up. And some countries that over-regulate are probably just at risk at falling behind some of their peers in other parts of the world where things might be less regulated.
So, that's a fair point you're making. And to me, I have always said this. I've been on a few government committees in India as well, chief ministerial committees and stuff like that. So I have always said that regulation it doesn't have to always be seen negatively. Just because something is regulated is not a bad thing. And the regulators also need to stop thinking like that if they have to regulate something doesn't mean they have to become cops, right? That is not the only point of regulation. The point of regulation is also to get that information and to have it in case something needs to be done, point number one. Point number two, to have some sort of a regulatory framework which ensures that, private enterprises left to themselves are unlikely. I mean, I won't say they won't. Some may not, but largely, especially if they start becoming, if they become a public company, they raise money from investors, there are going to be other parties who are going to say that you got to make the money. So some of those considerations will usually be there. So I think, therefore, I'm talking about more of a balancing thing from regulation. But to your point, yes, I 100% agree. Countries or markets that over-regulate will just make themselves unviable. So I would look at it as market forces. Just like, certain countries get a lot of FDI, certain countries get a lot of talent from abroad migrating to them. Countries like US, countries like Singapore. Whereas it doesn't happen with some other countries, and it's very clear the benefits of those outweigh the risks of those approaches that those governments have taken. So I think it's no different with any sort of regulation like that. But I think some sort of a regulation will ensure that, I mean, you're talking about monopolies. The monopolies can be created even the other way. If you keep it anarchist too, some sort of monopolies can be created because, for example, somebody is, I'm just saying, somebody has, for example, registered a patent. So for that period, they have a monopoly legally. So monopolies will be there. So the point is, what do you let them do with that monopoly and what do you not, right? So anyway, so this is always a interesting legal versus ethical sort of a thing. And I am somebody who believes that in some things, clarity is better than just leaving it. I don't know if you, watch cricket. I mean, I know we're in the Bay Area. I should be giving baseball references, but I don't know the terms of baseball. I know the phrases and terms and rules of cricket. So I'll say this, right? Cricket, there's often this thing that it's a gentleman's game. And then suddenly they'll say, you can't do this. So it's not on. So there are some players who argue, if it's legal, I will do it. And if it's not correct, it should actually be made illegal, which makes sense if you look at it, because what industry wants is clarity. They don't want to be painted with a broad brush, and they don't want to be living up to standards which are amorphous and not easily defensible. Right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that is fair. I think the main problem, though, is I think what you're saying holds for a lot of other things, right? It holds for marketing tactics, or it holds for a ton of other things. Indeed. Where, yes, one can define the line clearly, and the analogy transfers quite well. I think the main difficulty here is that there is too many moving parts in terms of what is even the problem at hand. For example, you have one set of parties that are more worried about these things, becoming much smarter than humans and enslaving us all. There's one set of parties. There's another set of parties who are, interested in the room for misuse in terms of these scams and things like this. Correct. So it's first even worth asking, what is it you're trying to stop to begin with? And then
that's a fair question.
And then how do you even intend to stop it? Because the one of the larger problems I suppose that comes here is the relatively global nature of this. Like, for example, crypto has been relatively harder to regulate because of some of the different dynamics there. This one, I suspect, has some of those characteristics, particularly with so many good open source models coming from all over the world.
True. No, absolutely. I think this is not we are not going to solve this in the course of this conversation. Our job is to raise and give our views on this, which is very interesting. Now, let me ask you one more question, which is sort of about
in fact, I should tell you, like, compared to safety, I spend a lot more time thinking of usefulness, since I do feel like the usefulness of these models have nowhere been tapped to the extent it could be.
Absolutely. So I agree. So that is the problem. So if you have, and that's why I'm saying it needs to be regulated, because it's like saying that if there are always going to be some people saying, oh my God, this is going to enslave us. Somebody else will say only 5 people are going to benefit from this. Somebody else will say, well, so my point is, when there are so many uncertainties, also the players will not invest in it. But if the regime is more clear, right, it'll be clear. So for example, it's a very random, I'm not necessarily saying this is a very accurate analogy, but it's the same. And like in India, sports betting is illegal, right? So because sports betting is illegal, there is a whole illegal industry, underground industry that profits from it. The government could very well legalize it and tax it, and even tax it at a higher tax rate, and people will gladly pay, right? But instead, the leakage is going to the underworld, which is not optimal for any. So what I'm trying to say is that regulation is not necessarily a bad thing.
Sure.
But if you regulate it the right way.
Sure. Anyway, I don't think I have any particularly unique insights on this topic compared to what you might hear.
Yeah. We talked about regulation and technology. Now let me go back to the technology bit, because that's again something which is fascinating, because obviously, like you said, the technological aspects are always going to be challenged because of the open source models. Now, do you really think that this is going to create a new breed of super companies in the AI cybersecurity companies are already having their time in the sun right now? We've read about the CyberArk deal, and we read about CyberArk, which is the Palo Alto Networks merger. And there was the Google Viz deal as well a couple of months ago. So there's a lot of action happening here anyway. But do you also think that some of these deals are being driven and the valuations being paid for these companies have to do with the fact that in the AI world, there is going to be a special breed of security companies that are going to be, pretty much monopolizing security, and therefore there's a battle for who's going to take that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, there's no question. There's a whole bunch of new, attack vectors that are coming on the scene. Like you've named some of them. I fully expect a lot of this to blow up significantly. As a result, there is probably going to be a lot of space for new cybersecurity companies, some of these existing ones to grow, etc. I have not looked at the specifics of these deals. Were they at quite extraordinary multiples, or were they at relatively more standard multiples? I have not seen all of that, so I can't. I don't know.
Even I haven't taken some expert study or something, but market, what do you hear? Is the valuations are very, very high.
Okay,
but obviously, the people, making, it happens all the time, right?
Right.
Even when Facebook acquired WhatsApp, people thought they were nuts to pay 19 billion valuation, right? But see where they are now.
Right.
So these things, some of these bets, we'll have to see where they'll go.
Yeah. I feel quite confident, that the cyber security market itself is going to be a lot bigger. Of course, I do not know about the specific offerings of these products, and then there'll be the decision regarding are they in a good position to sort of graduate into offering LLM security related things also, because they have the customer base and all that. I have not really analyzed that in that kind of detail. Okay.
But you do see some specific, you see a lot of capital being poured into developing new securities technologies.
For sure, right? Yeah, because there is so many new attack vectors that have opened up. Correct.
Okay, great. Now we are moving to the end of the conversation. Obviously, the reason I'm doing this with you is both of us are Indian, and we are living in different countries, but we are both Indians, and we're both very passionate about India. So I'm going to ask you this question: that how, as somebody who's a very successful Indian origin entrepreneur who's built a unicorn in the AI space, you are very well qualified to answer this question. So I'm going to put it to you. What do you think of the direction in which and opportunities in which Indian AI industry is? Do you see it being dominated by big tech, or do you see a lot of startups becoming as big as you guys have, and as it has happened with many others in the valley? And what are some of the opportunities? For example, can Indian AI startups do some hacks to be extra successful? Because obviously they operate with certain limitations. They don't have any domestic models. A couple of Indian players are talking about developing LLMs in India, but it's still not the same way where it is, right? I mean, you have so many options here. So where does the Indian market go? Do you think that India meaning Indian companies, should focus on developing their own LLMs, or should they leverage the technology already? Sometimes they say, right, you stand on other people's shoulders and you can still stand very tall. So which is the approach that Indian startups should take? And do you think that Indian startups have always been accused of creating a lot of value, but through services and not through products? Mm-hmm. So do you think AI has the ability to kind of help Indian startups leapfrog and say that, they can actually become very, very focused on and successful at products because of agentic AI, which is now available? So I'd love to get your views on that. And lastly, as a follow-up, I'd also ask that, one of the growth metrics that is being, talked about a lot is that today we are a 4 trillion economy, and we are fourth largest economy in the world, will soon be the third. And the goal is to be 10 trillion by 2032. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously there are different views on whether we'll get there or not. But assuming that we do, or even if we don't get to 10 trillion by 2032, mm-hmm. If we miss it by a year or two, that doesn't matter. But do you see AI as a big sort of a catalyst or steroid in that process?
Okay, let me answer the last question first. Sure. I expect AI to play a significant role. How significant is difficult to say. I do think when it comes to raising a country's GDP, the blocker may well become a lot of other old school things. The sure. nature of the infrastructure, the rules around capital investments and so on. I'm not much of an expert, but I don't know if you've been reading what Kanwal Rekhe has been writing, and a lot of others have been, about how yes. Some changes in rules have made it harder to invest in India and so on. Probably all things equal, those are not a good thing. I imagine some of those rules came in to prevent money laundering, but have done some collateral damage in the process, possibly. Mm-hmm. So I very much think an economy growing and so on is a lot more to do with classic Adam Smith, Milton Friedman, or Lee Kuan Yew sure. style principles. Okay. And I'm sure that will play a much bigger role compared to what AI plays. But yes, AI could absolutely play a meaningful role there. Now, in terms of the types of companies you were talking about, so one thing I feel very confident about is, there's two kinds of AI companies that could be built. One is, let's say, the straight up foundation model companies, or the infra companies in a way. Ultimately, there's enough of a debate even in the US regarding how many can actually survive. Most people believe it can't be more than a few. Okay. So it is an interesting question whether India should take a crack at that, similar to say what Deepfakes has done there, and definitely a number of Chinese companies. I expect them to be good competitors in that space as well. It is an interesting question whether there should be one or two significant plays with a lot of capital and all that. But the vast majority of the good companies in the US, even including many of them that you hear about a lot, like the likes of Perplexity and so on, are very much focused on the end product and how to leverage some of the recent advances in AI properly to build a valuable product. And this is something I absolutely expect will come out of a lot of Indian startups. I'm already seeing a number of them execute on this playbook quite well. In many ways, this is the logical next generation of the SaaS company even. Okay. Like in the last 10 or 15 years, a lot of Indian companies have successfully cracked the SaaS code of being able to sell into the US market or global markets, right. And, understanding that customer and so on. The next generation of SaaS definitely is the vertical SaaS agent. Mm-hmm. And yes, I absolutely believe a lot of good companies are going to be built on top of that. Many of them are already trained to have some of that B2B SaaS product chops as a result of the prior generation of SaaS companies, I think. Yeah, when it comes to this pure foundation model thing, it's an interesting question. It definitely will require a certain amount of risk capital. It will also probably depend a fair bit on are there, specific individuals that have worked at some of these frontier labs, or do they end up going back to India and setting up shop, etc.? Sure. Literally all you need is a handful of them. Correct. And many such people have certainly been, I'm sure, have had a good role to play in China's rise also in this particular space.
I'm sure they must have given them a good deal.
Right. So I mean, it is possible, but I have no doubt that on the second path there are going to be a lot of big wins. The first path, I mean, yes, it would be nice to see see a few big bets there, even if most of them will flame out, and one or two may still do well, which is exactly how the ecosystem in the Bay Area works as well.
Sure.
I mean, there were so many foundation model companies, more than half of them have folded.
That's the nature of the beast, right? Yeah. Especially when you're doing high risk development like that, there will be high burn as well.
Correct.
And but the ones that survive will change the world potentially.
Right. Yeah.
But so India, to our credit, or if I may say so, has done that on certain things like aerospace, for example. All its moon mission and Mars mission, etc., have been done at a fraction of the cost.
Right, absolutely.
Which is quite impressive.
Right.
Which is very similar to what China has done with the deep sea.
Correct.
So we can do it.
Yeah.
But somehow we have not invested in AI the way we have invested in aerospace for some reason.
And there might be some nice stepping stones also into that. Like, for example, I've heard fairly good things about a couple of the Indian foundation model companies like Sarvam and so on, though I've not done a detailed evals very recently about how well they work for Indian languages.
Sure.
So, for example, fine-tuning these models to make them multilingual in the Indian languages can be a nice sort of a stepping stone. And after that, one can, decide whether you want to get into the game of making the model code better than the frontier models here, or making it do frontier math better and so on.
So in fact, I selectively invest in very few startups, and one of them that came to me, they have actually developed this AI-based voice solution. I was really, one of the things that I was really impressed by was that they have solved for accent. So if you're calling an IVR, instead of talking to an agent, you're talking to a bot agent now, AI agent. And so they sound like, so if the call is from Delhi, then they speak in that Delhi accent and so on, right? So it's very good that way. So in some of the Indian startups have done some good work as well. But it's obviously very, very early days still, I would say. I agree with you on that. Compared to what's going on here, we're still taking baby steps. But I think the government, that's my view as well, which I've been sort of communicating to government through various fora, is that we have to identify, just like we did with space, we have to identify AI as a top priority, and the government has already started doing that, but we need to even have that, seeping into our funds, industries, investing in those kind of things. But
I mean, generally, I'm much more of a free market guy on a lot of these things. My first place to look would be: are there any places where the government can get out of the way? Can anything be done to let capital flow at a much greater rate?
Instead of trying to come in the way and help. I agree with you. I actually agree. Even if the intent is great, sometimes what happens is, and that's the thing with India, right? Very often the intent is fantastic, but what happens is they don't understand what's going on. They want to help. So I've seen this happening in Singapore. Over the last 10 years or 15 years, they've been trying to build a startup ecosystem. And initially, it just wouldn't work. Why? Because they would say, I'm giving you this grant, I'm giving you that grant. India does the same thing. In India, each of these states have these underdeveloped areas, have these institutions which give grants, etc. And my point is, you can't build a startup culture by giving grants. You can give some grants, but if you don't have accountability and say that, I'll invest, but you got to achieve this, and then I'll invest. That is what brings the hunger in entrepreneurship. So I agree with you. Government steps out of the way and facilitates it. Do you see that, as a big concern in terms of how you as investors look at VCs, etc.?
Again, I've heard this like second-hand, third-hand, and things like that, right? So I do not know what are the exact barriers to capital flow and things like that. Again, some of the stuff I don't even understand very well, because I have not been personally involved in this. Like I've heard talk about there was a Mauritius route to do investments in India, which has got closed, and that's whatever.
Mauritius and Singapore both were closed. It's a tax issue basically, because unlike the US, India levies taxes on foreigners for capital gains from Indian companies. So if you invest in an Indian company and sell, you pay tax. But this used to not be the case if you were structured through Mauritius or Singapore, because they had a tax treaty with them, which is now done away with. So I think that's what.
Yeah, like the US, for example, has this concept of this QSBS. Such things could be valuable there as well in terms of sweetening it and sweetening startup-related investment, perhaps.
I think so. Yeah, I think the good part is that I think we are today, in a situation where the government wants to do it, and they just need to ensure that the enforcement percolates all the way down. Sometimes it doesn't translate. The government may say we'll support startups, and then the tax department issues a notice to startups. That is kind of, speaking two different languages. So the government is definitely very, very, the Prime Minister has said in multiple fora that he's very keen to promote startups, and he's announced all this Startup India scheme and all that. But when it comes to implementing it, some of the arms are still very bureaucratic. Some of them are a little difficult. So I think that's what India, I think, needs to do better. Definitely. Okay. So great. This has been a very, very fascinating conversation. Certainly for me, I learned a lot as a non-techie who's interested in AI. I learned a lot about how it is playing out here, especially your journey, because I find that these personalized experiences to understand the broader ecosystem is very helpful. I always find that extremely invaluable, and that's one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast is I talk to people who are doing things which are different from what we're doing, and their perspectives are always gold for me and to our audience. So thank you very much, Vijay, for being with us today, and thank you for making it as a guest for the Uncluttered View's first Silicon Valley based episode, and thank you for accepting it at short notice, and I hope that we will see you a lot more often in India. But I really keenly look forward to watching Turing's further journey. I want to see, you guys becoming much, much more valuable, becoming public. So all the best with all that. I think even though you're valued at, almost $2.5 billion, this is just the beginning, right? In many ways.
Yeah. There's a lot of exciting work ahead to do.
Yes, and industry-wide as well. So all the best with that, and thank you again. And if we can talk about anything in India in terms of what we can do from a policy perspective, those are suggestions we can put together.
Sure. I mean, I probably have other friends that are smarter on this on these subjects than I am.
Because we keep doing that a lot.
Right.
It's not like we are trying to give suggestions that are not welcome, but we obviously the suggestions are a lot more welcome if people who are actually dealing with those talk about it, as opposed to coming from industry professionals like us who are advisors.
Right.
So thank you again, and thank you all for watching this wonderful episode.